February 1944. The western approaches carry waves through the night. Salt wind rasps the bridge of the nose. The bridge glass sweats cold. Droplets twitch to the ship's roll. Bearing drift slows and then seems to stop. The ping cadence strikes the ear like an indifferent metronome. A hand in a wool glove rests on the repeater. Polished leather creaks very softly. The needle holds its trace. Below breath is counted. 6 and then 8 in half a minute. Trim is true. The engines live only in the watch's memory. The boat listens to its own silence and believes in it. Herbert Werner stands between two layers of sound. He keeps the oath of silence. He trusts the doctrine that raised him. He fears the thief of time. Outside, the rhythm changes voice. Not light, tempo. Dry clicks as fuses are checked in succession along the enemy bow. Boot soles reset stance. Shoulders slip half a step. The rate of attack surges like a sudden pull on a line. The first bombs are already in the air before reason admits the fact. No turn across the stern to blind sonar. No blind interval to slide down and vanish. A ring of iron traces, a forward arc, not aft. The long-kept assumption breaks at the point of contact. Sound changes shape. The ping holds cold and straight. Then the dry blasts arrive. Not the long roar of a depth charge behind the wake, but a chain of short, hard blows that speak of touch rather than distance. Frames tick. Cold moisture falls on the neck. The grease pencil draws a shallow arc and stops. He once believed craft was a shield. The sea answers with a schedule. Ahead, the tempo of attack does not wait for courage. It asks only for time. And here, time does not belong to him. He had been taught to look for fault in the helmsman's hand or the trim of the boat. If the run failed, the officer on the scope had misread the drift, or the engineer had been late by a quarter turn on the valve. If the explosions fell wide, a man somewhere had broken the chain of craft. That creed had weight because it gave control. Fix the hand, fix the habit, survive the next hour. On this night, the creed slides away not with a mistake, but with a decision that was made far from the sea. In the mess 2 patrols ago, an older officer had laughed at Allied kit and summed it in a sentence that felt like a verdict. A crude contraption on a crude ship. He said it without heat, as if repeating a found truth. Metal plate too thick, wiring rough, fittings that looked farm-built, paint laid with a broom. The room had answered with modest smiles and the small luxury of feeling superior. It is easy to love the object that loves you back, the thing that demands skill and rewards it with a clear line and a clean shot. The boat had that intimacy. Each wheel had a feel. Each pump had a pitch. A man could tune himself to it and trust that the sea would respect the marriage. That love carried a cost measured in hands and hours. The boat was not built so much as raised. Machined gears met in pairs by number and by touch. Seats were shaved to match frames. Bearings were hand-fitted. Lenses were ground through the night to a polish that held a horizon like a kept secret. Pipe joints were set with care because a drop of oil out of place would speak in the battery air and teach a sour lesson. The engine had a voice, and men learned its words. A dockyard held such men in rows, each with a craft. The boat left the slip as a sum of their time. When it returned hurt, the same hands met it again, because repair was a faith. The doctrine matched the object. Mastery. Precision. Endurance. The enemy chose a different faith and wrote it into steel. The forward projector did not care about beauty. It cared about schedule. A platform that moved through water and created a picture with sound would not be asked to surrender that picture in the last seconds of an attack. The problem was drawn in a straight line. Put the bombs ahead. Keep the echo. Remove the silence between the last hold of contact and the first bloom of water. The answer looked like workboat, iron-welded to a clean deck, a frame of pipes and spigots, a rack that a pair of loaders could learn in an afternoon, a set of bombs with noses that did not think about time fuses or hydrostatic settings or clever depth ladders. They thought about touch. They would explode only if they touched a hull. Contact is a plain word. At sea, it is a promise. A picture drawn by sound sharpens as range closes. The old method betrayed that promise in the last half-minute. The escort had to run over the target. The water roared and frothed behind the screws. The hull itself ate the echo. The world went blind for a handful of seconds that the hunted knew how to spend. A turn, a change in depth, a knuckle in the wake, a prayer. The new method kept the promise. The ship never wiped its own eyes. The bombs went forward into quiet water, fell in a ring into the place the sound had measured and spoke when they met steel. There is a particular cruelty in a weapon that asks little of its servants and punishes the man who has given his life to a difficult art. The loaders did not need a school of years. They needed a count and a rhythm. Arms learn such things in hours. A projector can be swapped with a spare by bolts and a crane. A spigot can be changed by 2 men before noon. Ammunition arrives in crates that can sit in rain and mud without fuss, and that can be hauled by any vehicle that moves at all. The thing is not precious. It is repeatable. The sea favors repeatable. The boat feels the shape of this logic before the men dare to say it. The sonar picture stays bright and clean when it should have smeared to a grey fog. The moments he kept like coins in a pocket are gone. He cannot buy the turn. He cannot buy the drop. The chain of short, hard blasts lands in a broken circle that thinks more like a net than a hammer. Each bomb has less hurt than a deep charge that waits and blooms in a heavy swell. But hurt is not the measure that matters when touch is the trigger. A small warhead placed against thin pressure hull steel is enough. 2 strikes near the control room will end a patrol. 1 strike at the bow will blind the boat and force a rise that becomes a sentence. In the yards and shops ashore, the difference multiplies. Welded sections of small escorts move down rails in pieces that can be counted by ton and hour. The racks for the forward projector arrive in the same trains that carry common fittings. The workers who fit them do not need to read a long manual. A foreman's finger and a jig are enough to set the angle and fix the pitch. The wiring looms are common and colour marked. The paint is thick and dries fast. A captain can train a team on the pier with chalk marks and a metronome. He does not need to wait for a man who can trim a pump by ear. He needs a crew that can hold contact and keep account. The numbers do not sing, but they carry a drumbeat. 24 bombs in a pattern. A ring on the water that spans a few dozen meters side to side. A throw ahead that can be measured in a few hundred meters from the bow. A fall that takes a handful of seconds. A reload that fits into the breaths between pings. Rate of attack climbs until it feels like a pulse in the hull. The picture does not wash out. The blind period is gone. A hunted man survives on moments stolen from that darkness. There is no darkness to steal. The old contempt sounds thin now. Crude is not the word. Direct is closer. The shape of the thing reveals the thought behind it. Keep the picture. Touch the hull. Make the steps easy to learn. Make the parts easy to swap. Put the cost where it buys time, not pride. A staff officer ashore can double the count of projectors without changing the training pipeline or the maintenance burden in a way that hurts the front. A convoy can carry more ships with more forward racks. A group commander can set a rule that turns skill into schedule. 1 ship holds contact and speaks the range and bearing. The partner fires to a timetable, not a feeling. The hunted hears the logic as a series of facts that remove choices. He understands now that the charge in the water is not the center of the change. The change sits in the factory clock and the drill book. The boat he loves devours hours and returns power for those hours in narrow, beautiful ways. The projector devours none of that and returns power in a rough flood. When a spigot bends, the ship does not enter a long season of repair. A crane lifts, a wrench turns, another rack takes its place before the next night. When a loader turns his ankle, a stoker steps up and learns the count before dawn. The tool respects human limits by asking almost nothing from a single hand and asking the same little thing from many hands at once. He tries even now to find a human fault to hate. He searches the run for a breath that came too fast, a wheel that turned too late, a man who flinched when the first pattern struck water. The search fails. Silence was kept. Trim was true. Bearings were read with care. The failure did not begin in the boat. It began in a room with paper and clocks where the enemy weighed 2 moralities and chose the one that would move faster. Build men who are masters of a few rare tasks and arm them with objects that answer to the touch of masters. Or build many men who can all do a simple job on time and arm them with objects that exist to make time obey. The sea gives proof that needs no signature. The sonar trace holds bright when it should have smeared. The line on the board does not blur, it tightens. The blasts land where the sound said the boat would be, not where it was. Then the water is still again, and the picture holds, and the next ring comes sooner. It feels like a theft, because it steals the only prize that craft ever promised to a hunted man. Minutes. With minutes, a crew can be brave and correct and invisible. Without minutes, a crew can only be present. There is a further cruelty that he will think about later in the dry air of a depot. Perfection teaches loyalty because it flatters the faithful with belonging. The boat made him part of an art. The enemy made art irrelevant. The betrayal is not personal, yet it is felt in the body. Shoulders brace against blasts that arrive on time. Hands move because a schedule demands it, not because a mind foresees an opening. The heart accepts a lesson that the doctrine had denied. If the thing that asks less of the hand can attack more often and with a clearer picture, then perfection has walked out of the room and left courage to pay the bill. A writer on the other side will later give the lesson in one short rule written in a diary line. Hold contact. Attack to schedule, not to feeling. He does not need the paper to know it is true. The rule is in the water. The rule is in the rack on that deck, and in the way the loaders grip the bombs, and in the way the ship never blinds itself. He hears the beat of it in the pings that do not falter, and the short, hard blasts that do not wait. There is a way to lay cold fact beside the ache without breaking either. The forward projector throws 24 contact bombs ahead of the ship into a circle, a few dozen meters wide at a range of a few hundred meters. The bombs fall in seconds and speak only on touch. The sonar picture remains clear through the approach. The reload takes place before the trace fades. The blind period is removed. Rate of attack rises. Contact, time lengthens. Minutes die. The blame no longer fits inside a wheelhouse. It will not hold in a confession about nerves or a note about a missed bearing. The shape of the fight has divorced itself from the old marriage of craft and survival. Industry has chosen a different morality. The instrument that feels ugly in the hand serves time better than the instrument that feels beautiful. He hears that truth with the whole of his body, because the body is where the payment is taken. Perfection asked for love and gave pride. Availability asks for obedience and gives life. He does not have to say the word betrayal aloud to know that it is the name of the feeling that remains when the pattern fades and the picture still holds clean as ice. He waits for the boat to finish its small thought, that slight, alive movement a hull makes when it remembers its balance. The sea presses. The keel answers. The trim change is written across the body of every man aboard as an easing in the spine and a shared breath. The engineer's thumb rests on the wheel with the old confidence. The batteries carry the weight. A degree down at the bow, then the slow recovery that bleeds energy and buys quiet. The helmsman draws a thin curve that will not show to an eye that does not love curves. The wake knuckles then smooths to a pale line that pretends innocence. On the board, the bearing drift breaks its stubborn run and hesitates. The pencil waits over the paper. There is a beat when skill believes it has purchased a little time. The first answer from the surface is respectful. The ping cadence steps wide as if a thinking mind is listening for a cue. The contact does not vanish. It thins. The room beneath the bridge breathes with it. 6, 7, 8 seconds are counted with a finger against a rib. The old trick still holds a portion of the ocean. The hunted senses a small retreat and feels the ancient thrill of having fooled a machine by the softness of a human hand. He allows himself that half-thought. Then the surface changes its method and its manners in the same instant. The lead escort eases out of the line like a dancer who does not break the song. The partner slides into the role. It is a creeping attack, the kind that treats patience as a weapon. One ship holds the echo with a tenderness that is almost cruel. The other does the killing on a timetable. Bearings pass across the water like a whispered argument between partners who have rehearsed the quarrel for months. He had known about this pattern since the first circulars that spoke of new group tactics. Knowing changes nothing in the body that must endure it. The engineer turns the valve wheel a fraction to match the bow to the pressure. It is not a mistake. It is an act of faith in metals and lungs. The wheel slips a notch under the palm, just enough to mark a tremor, not enough to betray a man. The deck plates tell the same truth in a different tongue. They give a small tick underfoot that no one names. Hands in the boat begin to sweat. It is not fear. It is the body pricing the minutes that remain. He can feel the boat become more honest. The little lies go first. The smells grow sharp. Oil is oil. Battery air is battery air. Cold iron is cold iron with no romance left in it. On the surface, the second escort carries the new fire. The quick, dry clicks of fuse checks roll across the bow. The moves are practiced and fast. No elegance. All timing. The ring leaps forward and vanishes into night water. The picture in the headphones stays bright. It should not. The mind that was raised on old geometry says that the last seconds before the fall should blur to grey. They do not. The echo holds like a path etched in glass. He tastes the old word trick in his mouth and knows it to be a lie. The trick depends on darkness. There is no darkness. The new attack keeps its eyes open in the moment when the old one had to blink. The pattern lands with the sound he has learned to hate. Not the long rolling bloom of a deep charge moving through a heavy swell, but short, hard knocks that feel like a fist on a door. The boat answers those knocks through every frame. The sonar trace tightens. The bearing line draws in to a point with a steadiness that ignores human hope. He orders the smallest change that doctrine allows the move that a manual will not call fear. The helmsman obeys with love, because obedience is how men show love to a ship. The line on the board bows, then tries to heel. The knock returns. He gives the engineer one look that is not a request and not quite an order. The man nods and rubs two fingers together to say that the trim is best kept with touch, not speech. The crewmen forward count the seconds between patterns. Metric becomes pulse. The time that the trace stays bright is red like breath left in a body under cold water. He had once used those seconds to slide a knife edge between positions and escape with dignity intact. Now the seconds are a metronome for the man above, who does not look down and does not care that a perfect curve is being drawn in the dark. The second escort turns away. The first returns and steps into the dance without missing a beat. He can feel the doctrine being measured against the rate of attack. He had been taught that discipline makes a small force triple itself. You hold silence with the fervour of a priest, and the sea will repay you with invisibility. You keep the boat trimmed so fine that a droplet of water holds its round shape on a frame and refuses to run. You meet noise with stillness. You meet pressure with a point of balance. If you are faithful enough, the world will blur around you and the hand of the hunter will pass by. The sea loved this myth because it honoured her mystery. The projector loves something else. It loves the clock. Another ring goes out. It lands on the place where the echo says the boat is not where the boat was. Hands begin to shake. No one names it. The oil in the lamps dances in a belt of light that no one looks at directly. The navigator touches the pencil to the paper and leaves a black dot because the line moved without the hand moving. He breathes once as if that dot will help the boat. It does not. The helmsman's jaw tightens. The engineer's wheel gives that small fault again, and he looks furious at his own skin for telling the truth about the strain in his bones. He had believed that skill was a currency that paid for survival in a fair market. Tonight he learns that the market has changed its money. The partnerships above him spend seconds as if they own the mint. One holds the picture. One fires to schedule. They trade without words. They do not waste a heartbeat. He cannot catch them with beauty and cannot outweight them with patience. He tries the old prayer of depth and finds that depth is a story told to children. Contact based on touch does not bargain with distance once the geometry closes. There is a voice in another ship that has taught itself to distrust any emotion that is not useful. It speaks in notes and rules. The men in that ship are not lesser sailors. They are a new kind. They belong to a doctrine that says the sea is not a shrine. It is a workplace. He knows the name of the man who made that thought into a weapon. He has seen it in reports and heard it in rumour. A captain who teaches groups to hold contact as if it were breath and to attack to a drum. He thinks of that man as if thinking might help. It does not. The water carries the man's will without his presence. He attempts the perfect turn that once saved a night. It is the same turn. The board bears witness. The curve is clean and small and brave. The bearing line, which should have smeared at the moment of decision, remains a clean knife. The next pattern answers before the boat can admire its own grace. There is no dividend. The act of discipline costs energy, air, and nerve. The crew pay it without complaint because duty is to pay. The sea gives no return. He feels the emotion that men do not speak in the service because it has no use. He cannot name it and work at the same time. He writes it into the shape of his hands as they move along the rail and past the men and toward the ladder. Shame, without a word, is still shame. The creeping partners continue their conversation. The one that fires never loses tempo. The one that holds contact never lets the picture drift. It is the most intimate cruelty he has known at sea because it imitates love. Two bodies that know each other's weight and timing answer a shared goal with patience and certainty. They have stolen the thing he admired most about his own trade and spent it on a new kind of power. He wants to hate them for it and cannot find the leverage. Hate needs a point to push against. A schedule has no surface. The engineer speaks one word to say that the batteries will bear the next set of moves, but not the one after. The truth falls through the boat like a tool that slips from a hand on a ladder. It hits everything on the way down. He weighs options that doctrine forbids and that life demands. The next ring of iron will land sooner than the last. The seconds fade as a resource. Metric Y, which once lived in generous minutes that could be sliced into clever pieces, has become a countdown measured by the enemy's heart and not his own. He orders another small change, the sort that would earn approval at a table in port. The response from above is the same. No blind period, no smear. The pattern answers the echo like a signature on a letter of intent. He understands what the surface has made of him. He is not a rival. He is an appointment. He arrives at times that have been chosen for him by men who speak a language of drills and intervals, and who trust that language more than they trust their own instincts. He envies the freedom of that trust because it seems to lift weight from a spine. He tastes metal. He hears a man swallow with a click that is too loud. He notes a drop of water moving down a frame and thinks that he will remember the way it left a clean track in the dust. He imagines the deck of the escort in a brief vision that is not imagination so much as evidence. The rack sits square and ugly and useful. The loaders do not know his name. They do not need to. They know their count. They know the next step. Their bodies learn the rhythm that doctrine has set for them and give it back without asking for meaning. It is not a lesser form of courage. It is another kind entirely. He stands as straight as the space allows and lets the truth write itself into the plan that remains. Discipline will continue because it is who he is. He will keep the boat as a gift to the men who deserve a steady hand, even if steady hands do not change the outcome. He will feed the trim and hold silence and make the perfect curve again, because craft is not a tool he can put down without losing himself. He knows that the dividend is gone. He does the work anyway. The sea does not honor it. The sea is busy keeping time for another man. He feels the next pattern before it arrives. The room has learned the rhythm like a song it does not want. The blasts land short and close. The trace on the board holds, then tightens, then holds again. He thinks of the story he will not tell, because men do not speak about despair when there is work to do. He thinks of a line in another captain's book that will outlive them all. Hold contact. Attack to schedule, not to feeling. He hears the truth in it more clearly than the pings. He knows now that he has been faithful to a beautiful thing that cannot pay his debt tonight. The partners above do not argue about beauty. They keep their appointment. He looks at the engineer. The man meets his eyes with the flattened calm of someone who has made peace with arithmetic. There is one more curve to try. One more small purchase of seconds with energy that will not be replaced in time. They make it together because the hands remember and because the boat deserves to be treated as if the old market still exists. The curve is perfect. The water does not care. The bearing line holds. The pattern answers. The dividend is zero. The ledger is clean and cruel. Discipline keeps its form out of pride, and pride receives nothing but the right to stand straight when the next blast falls. The next pattern lands like a verdict. Short, dry concussions step across the hull and leave a tremor that the frames cannot hide. The trace does not wash. It tightens bright as a drawn wire. He knows what the picture means before the men do. The geometry has closed. The water that separates enemy intention from iron reality now measures in a handful of body lengths. The boat still holds silence. The trim is still true. The doctrine is still intact on paper. None of it pays for time. Sound returns in its new shape. The calm ping remains a cold line in the ear. The forward blasts arrive out of order with memory and right on schedule with the present. The engineer shows 2 fingers for battery margin, then folds 1 finger back as if the gesture itself has cost a percentage. The helmsman looks down to avoid the eyes of the men who trust him to draw a miracle with a wheel. He draws a curve anyway. It is perfect. The bearing line refuses to smear. The next pattern sells that refusal with another set of knocks. He has kept the private oath through nights heavier than this. Hold silence. Never buy life by breaking the shape of the boat. Do not make noise for fear. Do not throw the ship up into a surface kill box because you are tired of darkness. The oath was not written in any manual. It was written in pride and in the logic of a craft that promised salvation to the faithful. He feels the oath inside his chest as a weight that has helped him stand straight for years. He feels the enemy's tempo tap that weight aside with a finger. Heartbeats tally their own report. They climb past 100. They lift higher and press into the space between breath and thought. He can hear the count in the blood and in the small clicks a throat makes when it tries to swallow air it has not earned. The boat speaks through the deck. A thin tick runs along a seam like a fuse that will not stop burning. A drop of water falls from a frame and hits the back of a hand. A petty officer flinches and then holds his hand there on purpose, as if to accept the truth as a physical thing. Another ring goes forward. Another chain of hits returns the truth. Schedule has stripped craft down to gesture. The measure that governs everything now is contact time, and it belongs to the men above. He feels the choices reduced to a narrow pair that bends the mind. Stay and keep the oath. Accept the schedule that has turned him into an appointment on a partnership's chalkboard. Or break the oath and reach for a geometry that doctrine calls dangerous and the present moment calls the only chance left. The voice that speaks is his, but it sounds like the sea has run a wire through him and used his lungs for a conduit. He orders the emergency blow. The words fill the compartment like a thrown tool that cannot be caught. For an instant there is no sound. Then valves open. High-pressure air rips into ballast tanks with a violence that erases the boat's careful weight. The hull groans in a register that always sounds like someone else screaming far away. Compressed air hammers through steel lungs. Silence dies louder than any depth charge. Men brace without asking permission. Hands grip edges. Teeth set. The engineer rides the wheel and feels the boat shed water and purpose. The helmsman holds a course he knows will matter for seconds, and perhaps for none. Gauges climb like men running stairs in a burning house. The bow lifts with an ugly eagerness. The boat becomes a blunt thing, a thing that no longer moves through the sea so much as shove it aside. The mind runs behind the action, too slow to lead and too proud to admit it. He thinks in fragments that do not finish. Air, angle, surface, fire. The words have no verbs because verbs would be lies about control. His oath tries to climb back into his mouth and choke the order he has already given. It is too late. The tanks drink the last useful air. The boat leaps. The sea lets them through the skin of night with contempt and physics. The bow broaches. The sail tears the surface. Water explodes off the casing in sheets. The boat stands too high for a breath and too low for a prayer. The world returns in a flood of cold air spray and light that has been sharpened by men who have learned how to point it. He is on the bridge before his brain can file a complaint with his legs. He sees the escort as shape and movement and intention. He sees the rack set square. He sees loaders in oilskins moving like the ritual they have learned. He sees the projector crews already resetting. Action outruns thought. The signalman has a flare in hand because the body remembered a drill that does not fit this moment. The man stops himself before he saves the enemy, the trouble of sight. The gun crew tries to reach a cover that no longer belongs to them. A man slips. 2 others drag him up by the belt without speaking. The forward hatch coughs a breath the hull could spare, and then closes as if ashamed. On the escort, a light rakes the waves. It jumps once, and then pins them. The beam flattens their world into silver and blackened fear. Faces bleach. Steel becomes edge and glare. The sound of the projector crew at work is not loud, but it is the sound that decides everything. Locks, pins, steps, hands. It is a metronome that men have taught their bodies to obey. The weapon that respects time more than beauty makes ready in seconds that the hunted once used to live. He orders smoke as if smoke will argue with a schedule. The canisters belch and lay a poor curtain that takes the wind like a torn flag. A shell clips it and writes a line through the white that looks like an answer in a schoolbook. He orders speed that the batteries cannot sustain. The engineer gives it anyway because there is no point in saving what the next minute will steal. The first shells come low and mean. They chew water and spit fragments across the casing like hot rain. One fragment hits the bell of a klaxon and turns the sound into a scream. The bow jerks as if insulted. Men make themselves small but not cowardly. There is no cowardice in trying to let metal pass without becoming part of it. He wants to tell them that the movement on the escort is more dangerous than the gun. He does not waste the air. He catches sight of the partnership beyond the first. The dance continues. One holds the picture. One brings the blows. They trade with grace that has no romance in it. It is the grace of a tool doing what it was built to do. He feels a flash of envy for a doctrine that frees men from the burden of guessing. He feels the weight of his own doctrine turning into a coat that he cannot shrug off and cannot wear without bleeding. Heart rate climbs. 110, 120, 130. He tastes metal. He hears breath moving too fast and too loud in a space that wants quiet. He orders the helmsman to throw the bow through an angle that might steal a second from the picture. The helmsman does it like a prayer, said Late. The boat answers with a roll that lifts men off their feet. The next pattern leaves the escort and falls into water they had hoped to occupy after the turn. The schedule is ahead of them. The geometry bends to it like a witness. Shame comes without name and settles in the throat where an order should sit. He does not have language for it that he can afford. He is wasting pride in a place that taxes everything. He watches men, he respects, accept the cost of his choice, without showing him the bill. The engineer keeps the wheel as if it is a handhold on a cliff. The helmsman stands in a stance that forgives a bad god. A petty officer snaps a strap across a locker, not because it will matter to the fight, but because the boat deserves the courtesy. He thinks of the nights when the oath felt like virtue. He thinks of the drills that taught his body to make silence into a weapon. He looks at the rack on the escort and understands that silence can be a gift to the wrong listener. The men with the projector have learned a discipline that is happy to be ugly. It asks less of the hand and more of the hour. It gives results that do not flatter the soul and save the ship anyway. He tells himself that the order to blow was not fear. It was a change of geometry. It was a soldier's right to choose ground. The lie is not complete enough to comfort him. He knows the truth because his heart is telling it in numbers. He broke the oath to survive a schedule. He bought seconds by making noise and heat and light. The purchase price was identity. The receipt is printed on faces he will have to meet in daylight if daylight comes. The forward pattern lands too near for argument. The boat shudders. Something heavy shifts somewhere it should not. A seam leaks a prayer bead of water. The men do not cry out because sound is a resource and they still spend resources the old way. He orders another course change and feels foolish for giving verbs to hope. The escort fires again to plan. The loaders move with the same economy of motion that the old doctrine had once reserved for masters. He knows what comes next because the clock has been honest all night. Another pattern. Another line of light. Another second removed from a life that has been balanced in seconds since leaving port. He tries to look away from the escort and finds that he cannot. Shame insists on vision. Irrelevance insists on attention. He watches them work and understands that they are not his enemies in any personal sense. They are employees of a rule. He breathes once and lets the breath out slowly through the teeth. He will remember the taste of that air if he lives. It has the tang of metal and the sweet of battery, and the salt of fear, and the flat of regret. He gives the only order that still belongs to him. Keep the men alive. Keep the boat steady. Do not break faces with panic. He will accept what he has already chosen. He will stand in the open air he purchased with his oath and take what the schedule pays. He looks down the length of the casing and sees skin and steel arranged for the world to judge. He looks across the water at the men who have never heard his name and who do not require it to finish their work. Projector crews reset. The beam holds. The trace in their phones is clear. Action has outrun thought and left thought to clean up behind with words that will not persuade the sea. He keeps his back straight because there is nothing else a man can do when the doctrine he loves has yielded to availability and written his part in numbers he cannot edit. Morning flattens the harbour into pale metal. The wind is light and the water moves in long, slow breaths against the pilings. Paint flakes lift from old boards and drift like ash. A gull wheels once over the quay and forgets them. The day has that kind of indifference. The escort sits broadside to the pier with its work on display. The lines are square. The deck is honest plate without ornament. Salt has dried in white seams along welds that look like they were laid by a man who had a train to meet. The rack is forward of the bridge wings, a low frame of pipes and sockets set in rows that make sense at a glance. Spigots stand like posts in a field. There is no polish, there is purpose. He steps aboard with a pass that says he may look and not touch, and not ask anyone to explain what the shape has already said. The guard leads him to the projector, as if taking a visitor to a factory floor. The guard is bored. His boots leave black on the deck. He does not mind. The steel under his palm is warmer than he expects. It holds the night and lets it go slowly. The rack gives no romance back to the hand that tests it. Bolts, brackets, grease where grease is welcome. A hinge that will forgive a bad day. He looks for the delicate flaw that asks for a master and finds none. The device is a citizen. It lives here because the city has use for it. He follows the line of a wiring loom with his eyes. The run is short. The insulation is thick. Colours tell the hand where to go. A junction box sits where a man can reach it without breaking his back. The labels are large and plain. The lid closes with a clap that will not wander open in a sea that shakes. He tries to imagine this box in his own boat, and the picture will not hold. His boat hides its nerves like a proud animal. This ship shows them like veins in a forearm that lifts a crate. He kneels to see the pins and locks that hold a bomb on its spigot. They are sized for gloves. A loader can work them without learning the name of each piece. Release seat check, step away. A man with a crush injury could still manage the count if his other hand remembers. The cradle that carries a crate to the rack is on wheels that forgive grit. The path is straight. The stops are obvious. The deck gives a loader a place to plant a heel and throw weight the right way. The guard does not hurry him. There is a pride in this quiet that asks for no speech. He traces the throw angle with his mind from deck to air to water. The circle will land ahead in a neat ring. He has seen the ring from below. Seeing it from the source completes a shape that he wishes had stayed broken. He looks to the bridge and finds a stanchion with chalk marks, where a hand once wrote a count. He rubs the marks, and they smear onto his fingertip like newsprint. A petty officer from the ship stops a moment to check a pin that did not need checking. Habit is a religion everywhere. The man nods once without curiosity. The uniform carries a small stain where the shoulder meets the sleeve. Oil or sauce, it does not matter. The work will proceed either way. There is mercy in that kind of equipment. It does not punish a man for living as a man. He tries to put numbers in order without hiding behind them. There are 24 spigots. The ring spans a space you could measure with a tape carried by 2 men. The throw ahead would put the fall where the sound says the target is not where it was. The drop takes seconds that you can hold in the mouth as a count. The crew required to set the pattern can change places with any other men on board who know left from right and up from down and how to keep time. The thought that follows is salt and iron at the back of the tongue. Training for this is short. Replacement is a truck and a wrench. Failure is a downtime you can fit between meals. The cruelty is clean. The world rewards the people who write such sentences and the ships that execute them. He has come to that sentence by way of knights that taught him to worship more difficult gods. He stands and looks down the deck where a paint roller lies in a tray the colour of a cold day. There is a hair stuck in the film. He cannot stop himself from thinking that the hair will never matter to this ship. He laughs once without sound at his own pettiness. He is grieving. Grief needs objects. A voice behind him speaks in English that has learned to be kind to visitors. The officer is middle height and carries his ease like a tool. He says that the projector is simple and that this simplicity is its virtue. He does not boast. He lists. Quick to fit, quick to teach, quick to repair, reliable in rain, reliable under ice, reliable when men are tired. The words make the same quiet shape as the rack. He answers in a language that both men can steer without pride. He says that the device does what it says. He does not say that this is the highest praise he can offer. The officer points with 2 fingers at the loader's marks on the deck and tells how long it took to bring a crew to speed. Days, not seasons. He does not speak of the enemy. He speaks of work. He thanks the guard and leaves them both without ceremony. He remains. Daylight lies across the rack and across the simple tangle of ropes and hoses and cleats near it. The picture is not grand. It is faithful. In faithful things men find shelter. He puts his knuckles to the edge of the frame and lets the bite of it record the moment in his skin. He hears a line from a book he has not read but already knows. Hold contact. Attack to schedule, not to feeling. He mouths it without sound and knows that he has crossed a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. A younger man in his own uniform waits at the brow. The younger man carries a notebook he does not open. The younger man asks, because curiosity is honest in youth, whether there is anything here to learn that could be brought home. He looks past the question and then back into it. He wants to say that the lesson is only a rack and a ring and a count. He wants to say that the lesson is a city and a clock and a way of forgiving human hands for being human. He gives the line that will fit inside a man and stay. He says, "It was not their aim that beat us. It was their schedule." The younger man writes nothing and will remember everything. The words move out into the air and sit there as if they have always belonged to the place. He walks the pier once before turning away. The smell of creosote and fish and cold rope takes him back to ports that wore a different flag and to mornings when confidence came free with the light. He thinks of the lives sent into the old creed with love. He thinks of the hours paid into engines and optics and routines that returned pride as interest. He measures that pride against the blunt ledger on the deck he has left and finds a loss written in the round hand of daylight. On the far side of the harbour, a hammer rings against a hull. The sound is thin and exact and carries a promise that he can no longer keep. He lowers his eyes to the wet boards and steps around a coil of line that does not need him. The lesson follows without effort. The waist sits where the heart expects it, not in steel, in the part of a man that loved difficulty as proof of worth. The day does not argue. The day says only that ships will sail and schedules will be met, and that courage is a coin to be spent by any doctrine that knows how to count. He accepts that he has been rich in the wrong currency and that the bank has closed. He walks on and does not look back, because looking back is expensive and the bill has been paid. He does not dream of the boat any longer. He dreams of clocks. He wakes to the sound of a tick that has no source in the room and feels calm because it belongs to the truth he finally admits. The fear that ruled him at sea was the loss of time. He accepts it as doctrine on land. He says it under his breath, as if reciting a catechism that has been stripped of comfort and left with only accuracy. Resource per time decided whether a hull lived through a night. He looks back over the ledger without rage. Rage needs a thief. There was none. There was only a schedule written into steel and training. An enemy commander taught his men to distrust feeling and to bind courage to account. Crews were schooled to hold contact like breath and to fire to the minute. Factories were tuned to deliver fittings and racks that did not ask for masters. Shipyards produced hulls at a pace that made errors survivable. The shape of all of it is simple. Availability multiplied itself and bent every geometry it touched. He puts the old vocabulary in order and lets it go where it must. Noise and silence, depth and angle, cunning and nerve. They matter still, but they do not matter first. First is presence. First is the number of ships that arrive where they are needed and stay long enough to finish the work. First is the pace at which a weapon can be reloaded by hands that have learned a rhythm instead of an art. First is the certainty that if a unit fails, another will be at the line before the picture fades. He reduces the lesson to a measure he can carry without dropping it. Take the number of escorts available to a group on any given night. Multiply it by the patterns each ship can throw in an hour while holding a clear picture. Divide by the hours of battery the hunted has in that sea and sky. The quotient writes the odds in chalk on the casing. The chalk can be washed, but the sea will write it again. If the quotient rises, bravery loses value. If the quotient falls, craft regains a little of its price. He does not complain about the arithmetic because the arithmetic does not know his name. He goes back to the rack on the loaned ship in his mind and walks the steps without moving. Loader stance, pin, seat, check, step. He runs the sequence until he feels the weight of a case in his arms and the deck under his heel. He measures the learning curve in days, not seasons. He measures the repair time in bolts, not petitions. He measures the replacement in miles of rail and lists of parts, not in the hope that a man with golden hands will be spared for his ship. He sees why the enemy spoke of work. Work that can be scheduled will defeat courage that must be inspired. He writes one last letter to himself and files it as if a staff will read it. The edge belongs to the commander, who can turn craft into schedule without killing craft, and who can make availability a habit without making men into ghosts. He does not hate his former doctrine. He plants it in more practical soil. Silence still buys seconds. Trim still buys efficiency. Discipline still buys dignity. But none of these coins can be the treasury. They are small change. The treasury is the rate at which a force can present power to a line and keep presenting it until the line breaks. He thinks about the miles. Reach changes every conversation before it begins. When aircraft stretch the circle, when radar hardens the picture, when pipes and belts and rails feed hulls to the edge faster than the enemy can draw breath, choice flows to the side that can move. He frames it in a sentence he can say without heat. The mind that holds the calendar chooses the fight. The hand that holds the calendar writes the rules. The heart that serves the calendar learns a quieter kind of courage and keeps more men alive. He allows himself a private burial for the oath he broke. He does not break it again in memory. He keeps it where it belongs, as a tribute to a beautiful craft that could not promise what the age demanded. He sets it next to the new doctrine, which is not beautiful and is faithful. He stands inside that pairing and feels older and more honest. He can hear the sea in the silence of a room that is far from water. It is the sound of air through pipes and the distant hammer in a yard. He does not add poetry to it. He names it what it is. Throughput, a word with no romance and a great deal of mercy. He writes his final line with the steadiness of a man who has stopped bargaining with the past. Resource per minute decides survivability. Rounds per minute decides relevance. Miles of reach decides who chooses the fight.